What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Collin Stewart. You can check him out at predictablerevenue.com. Collin, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. We're going to mention some of your favorite shows, favorite episodes in your podcast too. But I love some of your episodes on software and tools. So some of the ones I had on, the co-founder of Zapier was a really good one, Wade Foster. I had one of the co-founders of Pipedrive on. And I think at the time, Collin, they had like 10,000 customers. I think now they have over 100,000. So they've grown quite a bit. The founder of Aweber I had on. I don't know, when I think of you, I think of software and tools. So I'm thinking of those, but there's many more. Mailshake was an interesting one. I think they had like over 70,000 users. And so, we're going to get into Collin. Collin knows a lot and uses a lot of different software and tools, especially when it comes to sales and outreach. So we're going to talk about his recommendations as well. But check those episodes out on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that in two ways. One, we help companies launch and run a podcast, right? We are an easy button for a company to do that. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. So Collin, we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy. So the host can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, most importantly, run their business. The second way is we do corporate gifting. So we will do automatic gifting for people's clients. They just send us a list. We set up a sequence. We do it for our clients and our partners, and they may get gifts from us. I'm not going to give away how often we send them, but multiple times a year for years to come, just as like a nice touch point to give to them. And we set it on autopilot for companies so they can just hand it off to us and we do everything else. So, for me, Collin, we've known each other for a long time here. The number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways on how I can give to my best relationships. And I found no better way with those two things, with podcasting and sending nice appreciation gifts over the past decade. So if you've thought about either of those things, you could check out rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. I am super excited to introduce Collin Stewart, three-time founder, currently founder and CEO of Predictable Revenue. You can check them out at predictablerevenue.com, where they've built sales development teams for companies like Uber, TopTail, Vox, and many, many more. He wrote the book called The Terrifying Art of Finding Customers, where he breaks down how to bridge the gap between customer development and sales. So he works with founders on finding and strengthening their product market fit. And Collin, thanks for joining me.
Jeremy, thanks for having me on the show. That's quite the intro.
Just start off, and I'm going to share your website, Predictable Revenue. Talk about what you and the company do.
Well, I'll give you the short version because the long story is pretty long, and we don't have 3 hours to record here. But the short version is we started off, I bootstrapped Predictable Revenue and started off as a company that basically, it was really just me helping my friends send cold emails. It's something I figured out how to do 13 years ago while I was trying to start a CRM company. And I just started doing it because it brought revenue and I didn't want to, didn't want to raise money. Didn't think we needed to raise money. Conversation for a different day. What we do now is we're still pretty strong on the outbound side and the sales development side, but it's more working with founders to help find their first customers, helping founders stand up that first outbound team or the first demand gen channel. And it's typically outbound email. And we do a lot. I think my favorite work right now is just working with founders on whether you're using outbound to book customer development meetings or you're using it to kind of scale up your first customers. We kind of help. I love helping founders kind of strengthen the product market fit, book meetings or interviews so they can their customer development interviews so they can learn more, and then transition those conversations, teach them how to transition those conversations from learning conversations into revenue conversations.
Yeah, so you could see, I mean, you've sales consulting, you have
Mhm.
outsourced SDRs and founder coaching. I want to break those down a little bit, but maybe we'll talk about it in the form of an example so people can kind of um, get some knowledge on how it works and also how it works for someone else. Maybe talk about Brian Neman for a second.
Brian is a founder I got a chance to work with. So Brian is our biggest fan. If you ever meet Brian or talk to Brian, he's the founder of Sanguine Bio and or I think it's Sanguine Biosciences. Um, we've yeah, I've done work with his wife. He just introduced me to his brother-in-law. Like they both have their own companies. But what I did with Brian was basically what I did. I described in the intro. He was
Where
solo
was he at
founder.
when yeah, he was
Yeah,
solo at the time.
he was maybe he had a co-founder, but it was Brian hustling and selling and struggling with pipeline. And he had read predictable revenue and reached out to us. And I got the first call with him and basically helped him build a system that just booked meetings for him. And so we built a
Is this
like
the
a fully
right place? Is it Sanguine
yep,
Bio? Okay, cool.
sanguinebio.com.
Okay.
You
Nice.
got it. Yeah, they're super cool. And I initially told them like I don't think it's gonna work. Like I don't think we'll be able to find the right folks and I don't think we'll
Why?
be able to
Why did
find the
you
right
think that?
companies. It seemed a little bit outside of our sweet spot in terms of who he wanted to reach. So it's basically like from what I remember is matching patients to studies is what he was helping do in the like bioscience studies field. And I was like, I don't think I hadn't done that before. And I'm generally pretty candid with people coming in ahead of time. I'm like, if I've done it, I'm like, yeah, I'm bullish. I can do this. And if there's some uncertainty, I'm pretty candid about like, hey, I don't think it's going to work. And every time I say it's not, I don't think it's going to work, like, all right, it worked extremely well for Brian, and he's been our biggest fan ever since. But basically, we built a system initially that was sending emails from his email account and booking meetings for him. And then he got so busy with that, he had to hire some salespeople. So we helped him with that and then helped him build the systems to have his salespeople have the emails going out on behalf of his salespeople. Our team was booking meetings for his salespeople. We kind of grew alongside him as his company grew.
So it
And yeah, so
sounds like was he doing all three of these then? Like you start off, it sounds like maybe the sales consulting and coaching is embedded into if you're helping them, as far as the outsourced SDRs piece.
our solutions have evolved over time. But yeah, it started off with like we were just doing email only prospecting at the time. And it's been interesting the kind of arc of predictable revenue. We started off 100% email only. In 2018, we saw that email deliverability was kind of taking a hit and where like the old way of doing things wasn't working anymore. And so we brought in SDRs. And now what we're seeing is that emails actually there's a bit of a resurgence and it comes down to you've heard me rant and ramble about Clay, so I won't do that. You can maybe link it in
Yeah,
the
you
show
can
notes
you
so I
could
don't
talk a
spend
little bit
30
about
minutes.
it just because I've heard it. Other people haven't. So feel free to share
It,
any tool software that you are bullish on.
it it's basically a spreadsheet for sales nerds, and you can do some like really crazy things in there, like designing like micro campaigns for left-handed founders that play guitar. I mean, that's a pretty silly example, but you can almost get there with Clay. If you open it up, you're going to look at it and go like, it just looks like Google Sheets, but worse because there's nothing in it. And so if you're going to check it out, email me and I'll send you a couple of resources or just look in their knowledge library. Like they got some crazy stuff in there. But I think with Clay and tools like it, there's been a resurgence in cold email because you're not just limited to the standard filters in your data source anymore. It's not just size of company, size of employees, job title. You can get so much deeper than that, and that was the piece that really opened our eyes. And we're back right into cold email, cold LinkedIn, but really small, really targeted campaigns.
Talk about the tools for a second, right? Because you mentioned obviously the services have evolved, right? So it started off as email, you do consulting, founder coaching, and then outsource SDRs, but you do calls as well. So what are some of the tools that you like to utilize so from a productivity and efficiency standpoint?
From an efficiency standpoint, this is another one. So first up, the if you have the best message in the world and you send your team after the wrong people, doesn't matter how good their scripts are, their emails are, their follow up, their execution, their everything. If you're trying to sell Rise 25 podcasting and you send them after farmers in Nebraska, like I don't care how good your SDR team is, you're probably not going to get the greatest response because I just don't think podcasting is in the farming business model, right? It's just that's not something that would make sense. And so it's not relevant to them. It's not going to get a great response. And so the number one thing that's changed in the last little bit has been the targeting. When you build a great list with Clay, you can get really targeted and say, okay, it's these specific folks for this specific reason. And we know they're more likely to be ready to reply because of these 3 to 4 things. And we'll build these like account qualification models that filter and sort people into the right buckets. So that's kind of step one. Step two, email deliverability. There's a bunch of geeky stuff that's changed lately. Email me, or I can send something to Jeremy if you want like a cold email deliverability guide. And then
What are a few things on that? Maybe 1 or 2 things on that end.
I think just, more email accounts and domains than you think are necessary and a low volume, and make sure you're ramping your email. You're warming up the mailboxes and keeping them to below 30 a day. And that's really what you want to do is show Google that you're a consistent sender. You don't want to have big spikes because I think the stat I heard of like 10 years ago was like 90%. This is 10 years ago, and 95% of Gmail accounts were created for the purpose of spam. And the reason is there's no history. And so every Gmail account that's created starts life with pretty good deliverability. But then after it sends a few emails, they see, oh, wow, these are garbage. This is spam. But you don't know until you've seen a few emails. And so Google uses this quarantining system. It basically means that every new Google or Gmail or Google Apps account gets really good deliverability for the first 10 messages. So spammers know that, and they set up what's called snowshoe spamming, and they set up 10,000 Gmail accounts, and they send 10 emails from each one. And so what you want to do is avoid looking like that and have us, do the math on like what's acceptable per inbox from a Google perspective, and then just send a consistent volume. And make sure that the most important thing is that your messages are relevant, because the most important thing for Google is that people open, reply, forward, click on your emails, right? The only thing they care about is engagement. And if you're not engaging with those emails, then they start to care about a lot of other things.
So we have the right audience targeting, we have email deliverability, and we have message relevance. What are some mistakes people make under that category?
Under relevance?
Yeah, messaging. Because I'm sure you've seen everything under the sun at this point.
I mean, I think people care too much about their message. Like especially with cold email, or like a cold call, because you're writing it down, you're like a human is saying it. I see a lot of founders thinking, oh, I should have a weight in on this, and um, I should be able to dictate the words that you say. When in reality, it should be a combination of the practitioner and the founder. Like obviously the founder is going to know, the product and the market and the opportunity and the problem space and all of that. But the sales team are the ones that know the tactics of what's going to work and how we're going to get in and how we're going to start the conversation. It's sort of for the same reason that the founder doesn't go and sit and look at your SEO keywords and go, no, don't focus on those ones. Focus on these ones. Like you would never think to do that because that's a silly idea. You've got a certain set of SEO words that you rank for. And obviously they got to be relevant to your business. But if you're not like, it's not like the founders coming in and going, oh, you have to rank for this one that's like way down on the chain that doesn't matter. And like, I guess as I'm saying, I'm like, yeah, I've done that before. But I think the mix of like, it's got to be a mix of both coming in, because there's just certain ways of opening conversations. There's certain ways of writing the messaging. But ultimately, I think the messaging, to my first point, like the messaging doesn't matter unless you have a great target audience. And I think the even bigger challenge I've had with founders is not being specific enough about the target audience that they're going after. I've been the salesperson off and on for PR for 13 years, and the number of founders I've talked to, and I'm like, hey, so who do you want to target? And they're like, oh, I want to go after, I don't know, manufacturing. And you're like, great. That's like 60,000 companies. Like any other criteria? And like, no, just manufacturing. The big ones, enterprise, and okay. And then, like you only get a few criteria, and you're like, great. I've got 10,000 companies and 40,000 people that I can reach. But like, how do you know who to start with, and how do you know how to carve up to get to the most relevant? Like, this is going to be the most relevant thing to say to them right now. And the relevance piece is the hardest.
Yeah, it seems like everything kind of bleeds from the targeting because if you're, doing farming manufacturing equipment, it's going to be different messaging. You could be very precise, very specific, and it's going to
Mhm.
hit home to that audience as opposed to we're trying to speak to this too big of a niche.
Yeah. I had two clients that were competitors and friends, and they were resellers of this software product, and they had one had this state, one had this state, and then they shared this middle state in between them. And I don't think it was physically in between them, but they shared a state. The one guy told me to bring his friend on, even though they're competitors. And the friend's like, "Hey, I've got Mike's list and Mike's messaging. Can I use that?" And I was like, "How did you get that?" He's like, "Oh, Mike sent it to me." Like, what? You guys are competitors. Like, we've already ran this. And so we used the Mike's messaging for I can't the names weren't Mike and Jim, but let's call them Mike and Jim. So we used Mike's messaging for Jim's audience in Jim's state, and it bombed. Like, Mike was producing like 20 meetings a month. Jim got like four. And he's like, "What's going on?" And maybe it was the brand, maybe it was the execution, the timing, but like even the exact same messaging with a different context and a different brand and a different domain name behind it performed differently. And so like everything's got to be really tightly calibrated to this is what's relevant. This is why it's relevant to me right now.
Wow. Yeah, that's like the tale of I don't remember the direct response copywriting piece on that, right? And it's like who's two pathways, right? So I love that story.
Mhm.
So it's interesting. I remember studying like Gary Halbert stuff, some of the top direct response marketers, and he said there was a point where he says, what's the number one thing that you want? And the answer was a starving crowd, right? The right person, who's got a big need to it. So
Mhm.
on that topic of the journey, right? We talked about Brian. What do you see as just walk me through like a sales journey, a sales team journey, like starting with founder and like some of the recommendations you have. Okay, at this point,
Mhm.
you just start putting these people in place and what you actually obviously help these companies do. But just so people and I have an idea, starting with the kind of the founder.
Cool. When I was starting my first company and like early in the founder journey, I always worried about, I felt like having a company was sort of like having like a suicidal pet that just kept trying to kill itself. And I was always worried like the company was going to die and just like die suddenly. And like, I was going to be out of control. And the longer I've been doing this, the more I realize like companies don't just die, they commit suicide. And the number one way they commit suicide is premature scaling. And that's investing in growth, investing in like trying to grow the company from a revenue perspective, trying to grow from a headcount perspective, trying to grow from making all these investments before you have a strong enough connection between your starving audience and the product that satisfies their hunger. And I think that's the biggest, most important thing I've learned. I've literally helped thousands of companies of startup, and specifically most of them were startups, build their first go-to-market channel. I've done it. I think I did the math. It was like 1,200 times with startups. The number one thing I saw was companies were trying to invest in hiring four, five, six SDRs, and they didn't have very strong product market fit. The founder couldn't tell me exactly who it is they wanted to go after. They If they did get a meeting, it wasn't like oh, there's a huge market pull here. It was just oh, well, we think it's this. It was a hypothetical. It wasn't oh, I know it. And I think to me, this is founder suicide because the cash in the bank is really your lifeblood, and you only get so many shots, right? There's only so much time you have. There's only so many opportunities. And so I'm a big fan of like conserve your cash until you've got you can kind of everything's lined up, and then all right, let's double down. And I think the way I see founders kind of making these investments, they're they're doing it because sales is something they didn't want to do, right? It's not I don't come from sales, I don't come from product, or I come from product, I come from engineering. I want to get sales off my plate as quickly as I can. I'm going to hire a VP of sales, a CRO, a shit-hot salesperson out of Oracle. And like those are all probably terrible hires because you haven't proven anything. Like only the founder can prove product market fit. Only the founder can prove this is the process to close a new customer. I don't care if you're an engineer. I don't care if the only language you speak is XML or HTML or Ruby, right? Like you found the product opportunity, and whoever found that opportunity is the number one expert in that problem space in your company. And there's nobody, customers love talking to founders. They love talking to people who understand their pain. And if you're the guy or the woman that found that opportunity, that found that problem space, nobody in the world understands it better than you. And there's nothing better than somebody who's in pain, who's that starving crowd, looking at the person that invented the hot dog going, geez, I'm so hungry. And you're that hot dog expert, right? Like there's nothing better. And so I think if you're a founder and you're thinking about like going and hiring some people, prove it first, then scale it up. And just make sure that the product market fit is strong, and there's ways of measuring that and quantifying that. My favorite way, there's a number of different ways you can find kind of like early like first tracks, but I think my favorite way is just referrals. Um, I use this anytime I'm exploring a new product opportunity. If I'm trying to say, hey, should we go open this market? Should I go create this product? I'm going 0 to 1 on a side project right now, and I'm literally doing this. I'm booking myself 3 to 5 meetings a week, and I'm going and I'm asking folks, I'm getting meetings because I know how to book meetings. But the thing I watch really closely is of all the meetings, and I'm doing customer development. I'm not selling anything. I don't have anything to sell. But the metric I'm paying really close attention to is of all the people I talk to, how many of them give me a referral to somebody else who I could talk to? Because that's a gauge of hunger, right? And really what I'm looking for, to your point, is that starving crowd. I don't want to go and spend my time, my life building something that I want to build. I've already done that and it didn't go very well. I want to build something for a starving crowd. I want to build something like when we pivoted from Voltage, which is the CRM company that had one customer, to Carb, and it took us a while to kind of figure out that transition. But once we had the product and we started doing the customer development, once we had the idea and we started doing the customer development interviews for it, we went 0 to 1 million in revenue in 3 months. And that was all on the back of doing customer development interviews. But there was such a great need that I was doing my interviews and I was asking questions, and people were like, no, 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 stop. You just said this, and this. Are you really working on solving this problem? And I'm like, well, can I tell you at the end? I just want to get through my questions. And they're like, no, tell me right now. Because I want to, if you're solving this, I want it. I want it now. And I've got 3 friends that also want it because this sucks. It was a huge hair on fire problem. And so the
What are
strength
some of those
our-
key questions, Collin, that you ask in a customer development session?
and I'm happy to share. In fairness, it was about who I was sitting down with and like the pain that they were experiencing. And so I just do day in the life interviews. With Carb, I was focusing specifically on sales productivity for sales development reps. This was 12 years ago. So the Sales Loft and Outreach, and I think Zen Prospect or Zen Leads, Apollo was still Zen Leads. Apollo was a data source. Um, Sales Loft was a tool for scraping data off of LinkedIn, and Outreach was a recruiting tool at the time. And so there wasn't really a lot of, or maybe the 3 of them were like either there or about to pivot into the sales engagement space. But if you were an SDR 12 years ago and you wanted to send 50 emails, it was like 27 clicks per person you wanted to email in Salesforce. It was extremely painful. And so the biggest bottleneck for every sales development leader was just automation. Just like, hey, I want to send this email, do all the things to make it appear in Salesforce. And everybody had just implemented Salesforce, so everybody's really hot and heavy on like everything's got to be in Salesforce. People were spending like I talked to one company that spent $500,000 just implementing this system in their Salesforce. And so the question I was sitting down with is, say, hey, I want to talk about your sales team. Tell me about the tools you use. Tell me about what you love. Tell me about what you hate. And I would ask different questions. I'd want to understand their job, their role in the organization, their goals for the year, their goals for the quarter, how they were measured, how they got their bonus. And all this led to the magic question, which is, if I could solve any problem for you, what would it be? And everybody said productivity. Every sales development leader, and in fairness, actually, every VP of sales that I talked to that I asked this question said my sales development team, because there was just so much manual clicking. And so if I ever talk to a VP of sales, they refer me to their SDR team or their SDR leader. The thing that helped, like this was a pretty obvious pain, but the thing that really helped kind of quantify between like, this is something that's painful and this is something that painful that is going to get, that we're going to be willing to part with money in order to solve, was the kind of three follow-on questions I ask after every magic question, which is scale of 1 to 10, how important is this to you? Scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with how you're currently solving it? And then what would be the impact on your business or on your job of solving this? And so importance, satisfaction, impact. Importance tells you how pissed off they are about it. Satisfaction tells you how likely they are to move forward with the solution. And impact tells you how much you could charge for it. And in this case, it was 10 out of 10 importance, 2 out of 10 satisfaction, because nobody really wants to say one in this. They're like really bad. So like 2s and 3s are great. And then the impact would be like 3 to 5xing the productivity of their SDR team. And so it is a pretty tremendous impact. And that's basically what pulled us up to 1 million so quickly.
Collin, this is gold. I'm going to have to re-listen to this really. I listen at 3 times speed. I have to slow it down to 0.5 just so I get it, because this is really important. Anyone who's launching a product, a new service, this is like golden. So I appreciate you kind of sharing your process with that. And I do want to talk. There are a couple favorite stories from the book. You know, people can check it out. Terrifying Art of Finding Customers. You've said this is your words, not mine. But the $4 million hard drive. I think that has to do with Voltage CRM. So talk about Voltage CRM.
Yeah. I mean,
there was an interview you did. You're like, my hard drive is in my closet right there, and it's $4 million hard drive. So
yeah, it's right up there now. Man, you went deep into the archives. So we basically spent 1.5 years working on a CRM that nobody wanted. My customer development process was, I read all the right books. I read the Mom Test. I read, where is it? The Startup Owner's Manual and 4 Steps to the Epiphany, and like all of lean customer development, lean product, like all those books. But the thing I got wrong was I just did all the interviews wrong. I was like, hey, this is what I'm building. Isn't that great? And everybody went, yeah, love it. And then I went and built it. And I came back and I was like, hey, we built the thing. And they're like, good for you. Tiny golf clap. I was like, damn. And so when I like, and I'm a good salesperson, and like probably not the best, probably not great, but like good. I could consistently close. And so my co-founder was like, hey, you know how to close? Like, well, why wasn't anything closing? And I'm like, I don't know. Like maybe I suddenly got the yips and I just forgot. And
the yips.
We didn't have
the sales yips.
The sales yips. And we just didn't have a starving crowd. We didn't build something that people wanted to. And we spent 1.5 years of our lives on that. And with Carb, the thing that changed was I started asking questions. I started doing those day in the life interviews. I think the thing that's easy to miss, because the journey happened for us, it happened so incredibly quickly. And one of the gifts of writing the book is that it kind of forced me to look back and recognize some of the things that I'd done. I started my life in sales. I still am in sales, but I learned how to start a company. I learned customer development, most importantly, as a salesperson. And what I noticed is that customer development is just the first half of a great sales conversation. And the biggest piece of the book, the reason I wrote the book, is that the customer development world is not connected to the sales development world. And especially if you're an early founder, if you're trying to get that first 1 million in revenue, those two, you have to be doing both of those at the same time. And so I really wrote the book because I was just tired of like talking about strength of product market fit, and you need to improve the strength of it before you start investing and go to market. And people kept saying how, and I didn't really have good words for it. And so that was really the genesis of the book, was the idea of the customer development funnel, that you can and should sell to those people that you do your customer development research with, because you can't call it customer development if none of them actually give you any money, because that's the action that turns somebody from just a person into a customer. And if none of them turn into customers, you didn't do customer development at all. You did a university research project where you asked a bunch of people stuff, and then you went, cool, we learned something, and you wrote a report, and then you were like, cool, now I got to sell it. And you forgot about all those folks. Like, imagine if your hair's on fire and you interviewed 50 people with their hair on fire and you're inventing a fire extinguisher. And if you allow me to stretch the silly analogy, you come back 3 months later and their hair is still sizzling. I know, silly. But then imagine looking at those folks and be like, hey, thanks for your help building this. And then like turning your back on them and walking away and be like, I got to go find some people to sell this thing to. Like, why don't you just like their hair is on fire? Like you can see the sparks. Like, why don't you go ask them? And that's where the idea of the customer development funnel came from, is that you need to be able to level up the people you talk to in your customer development process from, hey, I'm just here to learn, to eventually sell to them without being a bad salesperson about it and like bait and switching anybody into a sales conversation. When I do it, it's very intentional. The first 4 calls we have are 100% learning only. And I know eventually if they're going to be in pain, they're going to ask me to use the product. And if they don't, I'm still
It'll
going to
naturally come about if you're talking to the right person with the right problem.
Exactly. So the first conversation is exploratory. Hey, what problems do you have? Right. The next conversation is focused. Hey, I want to talk about your sales productivity problem. The third conversation is a paper feedback. Hey, I'm thinking about building this. These are the chunks. If I built this, do you think that would solve this problem? Right? You kind of lay the hypothesis. Hey, I found this in exploratory. We focused on this and it sounds like it's painful. Yeah, cool. If I wanted to solve it, would these 3 chunks solve it? Yes? No? Oh, what else do we need to build? Cool. The fourth step is the MVP feedback, where you say, hey, you told us to build these 3 chunks. We built those 3 chunks. Did we do a good enough job? Does that solve it? Cool. And then like that's the customer development funnel. And at the end of that, if they say yes, yes, yes to all of those things, 1, they're probably going to ask if they can use it. 2, if they don't, invite them into a sales process. Or even if they do, invite them into a sales process. Hey, it sounds like this is going to be helpful. Why don't we set up some time to talk about what it would look like to implement that for Rise 25? Very simple.
In your mind, so like we're talking founder, right? We're proving it out. We're finding product market fit. And then you're like, okay, we find that. What do you see as you're scaling up the team? What's like an ideal team structure as we're going from founder to the next phase and then the phase after that?
Yeah. And just one, if I can kind of nitpick on one phrase, I don't love the idea that you get product market fit and you have it forever. I don't think product market fit is something that's like a binary switch that just gets flipped. It's not 0 or 1. It's on a spectrum of weak product market fit to strong product market fit. If I only sold left-handed scissors, market's very, very small, but you could probably find some customers for that. But if you're going to sell, I don't know, a delivery driver and customer flow to restaurants, it's going to save them money and make them money at the same time. There's going to be a lot of folks that are going to care about that. And so I think strength of product market fit is kind of the way I think about things. And as you go and as you progress, the more you learn, the more you do customer development, the stronger it gets, the more you learn and build and adapt. And then when you open up a new market, there are new variables. And so your product market fit isn't as strong. Because it's impossible. And the reason I kind of nitpick on this is when you sit down with the founder and say, you don't have product market fit. They're like, no. I have customers. I have a market. Product market fit. Like it's there. And I've had this argument hundreds of times and I got tired of it. And because they're right. They do have a product. It is in market. You just don't have very many of them. And the market's not very big. And to your point, there isn't a starving crowd. There was like, we just went un petit peu. Which if my French's memory is okay, I think it just means like a little bit, but I don't know. Anyway, so if you have a great starving crowd and you built a really great product for them, then like it makes everything so much easier. Now, back to your question about like, what do I recommend founders from like, how do they build a sales team underneath them? I mean, the first thing is like, make sure your product market fit is strong. And if you're opening up a new market, just consider that your product market fit is really weak until you know more. And it's not really weak. It's just you've got this equation and there's a bunch of unknown variables. So you have to assume there's zeros until you know more. And if you think about it that way, you don't go charging in with like, $100,000 a month marketing spend on this new unknown market that might have a sales efficiency of like that you're never going to pay back that investment. It's all about like keeping your powder dry until you're like ready to roll. But to finally answer your question,
I like how
at,
you kind of hound on this point because I'm sure you get the same question I'm asking. A founder comes to you and goes, Collin, I just want to get out of sales. Like, what do I do? And you're like, wait, before you get out of sales, you got to do this product
Mhm,
market fit. You got to make sure because then you're just going to be spinning your wheels, wasting time, energy, and money on a team. So
mhm.
uh, I got you on
Totally.
that.
Yeah, you want to get out of sales, quit your job, go join like a FANG company. Like if you're a founder, it's always going to be a small part of your role. And so if you're the founder, you're in sales right now, everything is on your plate. What you want to do is look at what are the least valuable parts of your job, of the sales role? What are the things where you add the least amount of value? And that's probably prospecting. It's probably booking meetings. And when I say booking meetings, I mean like scheduling meetings, rescheduling meetings. It might be like writing the proposal, right? These are things that you can outsource to like, the proposal, if you're doing it new, you could probably get like, I just send the call recordings to a GPT bot that I've got, and it gives me recommendations on like, oh, here's the state of work. Here's this for, book-in meetings and things, having, I wouldn't say an SDR, but like an
Start getting
intern.
all the pieces of the process off of your plate so then when you do hire someone, you have these in place for them just to be in their zone of genius.
Exactly. Yeah, you're building the organization chart underneath you. And so like pick the things where you add the least amount of value and then hire for that role, but keep your hands on all the roles and don't try and hire like four roles up from what you're doing now. Right? Like it's really tempting to go and try and hire that like sales leader who's been there, done that before. But if you don't need a sales leader, like it's like
I've heard
hiring a hammer.
varying opinions on this. That's why I love to hear yours because some people are like, yeah, just hire a sales manager and then they'll help hire the salespeople. Or I've heard, yeah, there's a million different
Yeah.
things flying around.
If you need a hammer, don't pick up your screwdriver, right? Like your hammer is something to beat nails with. Occasionally I hit them. A screwdriver is something to turn screws, A sales manager, a sales leader is going to build a sales team. If you don't want to double click and then suddenly build a sales team, don't hire that person. And I would argue that you probably don't want to hire that person until you have proven it that you can, one, sell, two, you've got the process, three, that you've already hired and built the team, the systems, the infrastructure. Because there's just so much risk that goes into creating a new department, especially sales, is arguably the most important. Once you've got the product and all that up, if you can't take it to market, there's no revenue, there's no company. And so I hear a lot of founders say, oh, I want to get it off my plate. And I'm like, why? This is the single most important thing to your company. And you're the best at this in your company. I don't care if you're not a good salesperson, you're going to be the best salesperson your company has ever seen. It doesn't take that much. So that's my advice is prove it, then scale it. Um, Pick the least valuable part of your job kind of every week, every month, and like hire up. And then only hire a sales leader if you've already proven that you can make a sales motion work and you know precisely what you want. Because even if you're hiring a sales leader, there are 10 different types of sales leaders that you might want. And you really want to match that profile to the profile of what you're going to be selling of your sales motion. And you can't know that until you've done it.
So, Con, we have about 3 minutes. I have three questions that probably would take an hour, but we'll condense it. We'll see if we can cover it. I want to hear about Uber because it's very
Mhm.
instructive in your book, obviously, Terrifying Art of Finding Customers. Also, I want to hear about your shelf of honor and what books are in there, and then maybe some favorite podcast episodes. So, maybe start with Uber first, and
Cool.
then we'll rapid fire maybe through the shelf of honor so people can get inside your brain and what books you love and podcast episodes.
Cool. When Uber launched Uber Eats, I'm excited to be able to tell the story on a podcast. I just got approval from Uber's legal team, or we got, I guess it was a while ago now, but we got approval to tell the story in the book. I've been wanting to tell the story and alluding to it for a long time. But when they launched Uber Eats, they tapped us to book meetings for their sales team with every restaurant in the top 50 cities and the top 25 restaurants. We did that for a couple of months. We booked it was like 300 something meetings a month. And then they literally hired 100 BDRs to replace us. So it was a really interesting 4 months. And what that taught me was product market fit is a multiplier of your go to market. Because Uber got like, I don't know, 6x better sales efficiency than any client we'd ever seen. The Shelf of Honor is the book shelf that's closest to me. It's got all the books that I reference on a regular basis. I've got Dan Olson's Lean Product Playbook. I've got Good Strategy, Bad Strategy in there. That's one that's got probably the most notes on pages. Obviously, 4 Steps to the Epiphany, The Mom Test, The Messy Middle, obviously awesome. Stop Asking Questions by Andrew Warner is an underrated, fantastic book. If you're in sales or running a podcast, it is just one of my favorite books. And I didn't find it until only recently.
He
So
came on, there's an
that one.
episode with Andrew talking about some of the key points of the book, so people could check that out. It is a great book for sure. The Mom Test, that
Mhm.
I don't think I've listened to that one.
Yeah, it's a good one, especially if you're doing customer development and asking questions. My favorite episodes, I'll give you two. I don't know the episode numbers, but my first one with Jamie Buss from Zendesk, she taught me how she was forecasting Zendesk's revenue within 1%. At the time, they were doing $500 million in revenue a year. And so we got into like medic and sales stages. It was a really geeky sales podcast. It was early days, so the quality from my side is terrible, but from Jamie, she was one of my favorite guests ever. And then the last one would probably be most recently. I think it just came out with Mace from Fixify, and we've transitioned the podcast from like only sales development to doing founder stories and revenue, kind of going deep on revenue tactics. So Mace from Fixify and Jamie Buss.
Michael Feaster or Michelle Feaster?
Michelle Feaster. That one was incredible too. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one for sure. First of all, Colin, thank you. Everyone check out predictablerevenue.com. And of course, as we mentioned, get the book. I'm going to listen to an Audible, Terrifying Art of Finding Customers. Thank you so much, Colin. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Jeremy. It's good to see you again.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.